those. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jutras.
Thank you, Laura. Mr. Jutras, okay. Thank you, Laura. So before we hit the personalized learning and expanded enrichment academic opportunities, which we highlighted, we do have to hit the identification piece. That's, forefront of our conversation that we need to talk about. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that at the end of the last academic year, which of course was unique in so many ways, our total number of formally identified gifted, advanced, or talent development learners went down slightly. Went down to 7.4% of our total K through 12 population. You can see the numbers before you. So it was a slight decrease from 7.6% identification rate. But I remind all the commissioners and anyone listening at home that that's because we were largely unable to test any additional students for identification. And so we lost hundreds of students who matriculated, graduated as seniors, and they came out of the population. And we were only able to test a small number of students this last academic year. So on the right side of the screen, you can see what are our plans to reach 10% as a minimum. That's what the state expects every district, every LSS to come up with. And so our target is for by 23-24 the following. So we've begun incorporating analogical reasoning in pre-K lessons and in curricula as much as possible because these kind of ability screeners, these cognitive ability screeners are very reliant on analogical reasoning, but that's not a taught skill per se. So we're going to try to teach it and make sure that we can level the playing field as much as possible. As I mentioned earlier, for most of last year, we were unable to test students. It needs to be administered in person. We did test approximately 1,200 students. I'm happy to report, though, we hit a 14.25% identification rate. Remember, if we want to get to 10%, every year has to be above that 10% to make up the ground there. I will also say that as of 20 minutes ago, we've had 790 students tested so far this academic year, and we're right now hitting a 24% identification rate. Now, I'm not going to say that we've solved the mystery yet, but that's good data right now. So we'll check back for next year and see how that goes. And then, of course, this year we're featuring the fact that every kindergarten student in our district gets identified, gets screened, as well as all those missed first graders from last year that were kindergarten students. So about 10,000 students will be assessed this year. Fingers crossed we can hit some really good numbers and then leapfrog past the 7s into the 8 or 9% identification rate. Here's the snapshot of what our students look like that were identified last year at the end of the academic year. I call your attention specifically to the talent development line, which is the entry point to our conversation here. It's very unique in Baltimore City schools. We identify learners who have higher than average cognitive ability. They don't have to have demonstrated success, academic achievement success in math or ELA, which is pretty much the standard across the state and across the country. We want them in the conversation earlier. So talent development is our entry point. So if you look at the talent development line in blue, and then you look at the equity index minimal, remember as part of the board policy and regulations, we said that every year we would report out publicly where we stood on an equity index. This is Dr. Donna Ford's model of a 0.8 factorial. So if you look at where we need to be at least a minimum to be in the conversation about being equitable, and you compare that to the talent development number, we're trending in the right direction with those entry point students. We're not where we need to be overall in the total, but talent development is our growth area, and that's where we're going to continue to see we're becoming more and more equitable every year. Next slide. So now we want to move on to personalized learning. And so a big piece that was the epicenter, as it were, of the gifted and advanced learning policy and regulations, and something that sets us apart from other districts in the state of Maryland, is that we require individualized learning plans for all formally identified talent development, advanced and gifted learners. And I want to call out to the board's attention that the student learning plan, which is a new initiative this year from the district, that every student gets a student learning plan, aligns brilliantly with the individualized learning plans, which we've had for a number of years, but is now officially policy and regulations. In particular, the student survey section, the family survey, the data analysis, student needs, goal setting and evaluation, that's always been part and parcel of the ILP. And now it's also part and parcel of the SLP. The big important differentiation pieces of ILPs, because the question would be, well, if we have the same kind of things in both, why do we need both documents? Because the ILP is still going to be focusing on that acceleration of compacting curriculum, of pre-assessing, and then getting kids as quickly as possible to the next level of challenge as is appropriate to them. And the other piece of the personalization is that students are required to have differentiated homework and coursework, as well as a long-term kind of project-based or problem-based project. On the right side of the screen, you can't see in great detail, but trust me when I say, as of last week, before we reached October, our ILP is now an interactive template housed in Infinite Campus. So this will help facilitate and streamline the process for schools to create these ILPs for students and their families. And it will be housed in Infinite Campus, so it'll follow the student through their entire career in Baltimore City schools, and it exports to the parent portal. So parents will also need to sign off on it, and they'll have regular access to the ILP going forward. This took us about a year to work with ITD to make happen, so we're very excited about announcing that. Next slide, please. Renzulli Learning is something we've been working with for a long time, even before it was called Renzulli Learning again. It was GoQuest for a while. This is best aligned for our pre-K to 5th grade students. We get a lot of use with it, but we do have 1 or 2 high schools using it as well. Essentially, it's an online learning platform. What it does is students do a profiler, which basically determines how they like to learn, what they're interested in learning, and then it queues up thousands of different types of enrichment activities for them to pursue. Ideally, a teacher would guide and manage that process, but students can also do it on their own. We use this a lot during the beginning phases of the pandemic, where parents and guardians were able to manage that work at home, and so students everywhere were able to access this if they needed to. And we buy thousands of licenses a year to make sure that we meet needs upon demand. Next slide, please. Speaking of meeting student needs, Apex Learning, as you know, the district has gone big on making that available, and that's great for all learners. I'm very happy to say it's also really good for our gifted learners. In particular, we've developed something called Gifted Exploratory Learning, or GEL. I'm not very good at making up these names, I'm sorry, but we call it GEL. And the notion is to kind of whet the appetite of kids in middle school. Sadly, middle schools across the country, not just in city schools, they don't offer enough of a selection, of a menu of options for students to kind of engage in the work. And so students can select certain courses that they can follow at their own pace. There's no grade associated with it, so there's no pressure of failing. They go in, they can test a particular course out, and if they like it, they can continue on. If they don't, they let their instructor know, and then they exit out of it. Some of the courses they can access that they wouldn't maybe be able to get into in a traditional way in middle school is they can do an art appreciation course or music appreciation course, sociology, multicultural studies. Those are things not typically found in middle schools. And what we're trying to do is make sure we're meeting the needs, the diverse, unique interest needs of our students. And of course, these are used to support the ILPs to really customize and personalize the learning. Next slide, please. In that same vein, there's another tier of Apex Learning that the district has not purchased en masse, but we have been able to leverage.
Right now, first, Governor Larry Hogan's former chief of staff indicted by a federal grand jury. Next at 4, the multiple charges he's facing.
Then a teen suspected in a carjacking in Towson. Now investigators uncover.
Thank you. As I was saying, so another piece of the Apex Learning portfolio that is unique is the virtual learning school. These are licenses that we are able to parcel out selectively upon request as needed. These feature 2 semesters of asynchronous learning with a certified content teacher provided through Apex Learning. They're endorsed through MSDE as well. This has allowed us to bring in Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 to select accelerated math learners in middle school. It's also allowed us to drop in AP courses at high schools that maybe there's not enough teacher capacity or enough students. So we have one school, there are a couple of kids that wanted to do macroeconomics this year. Well, they only had 2 students. The school can't afford to have a teacher just run it for two students. But rather than tell those students, sorry, we can't meet your needs, we're able to contract that out with the ALVS. And I will say from last year, the handful of kids that took AP courses through ALVS, they averaged 4s and 5s on their AP scores. So it's good and it's useful and it's personalized. Next slide, please.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. So I'll talk a little bit about partnerships. We can't do this work alone. We have some amazing partners that are both national, state, and local that provide us support and partnerships and create opportunities for students. That includes C2Y, which I'll talk about, Ingenuity Project, which is an amazing partnership. Their middle and high school program, that does acceleration and science curriculum and math curriculum, and we have entrance criteria, which you guys are aware of. We have MEGS, Maryland Advisory Council for Gifted, Maryland Mensa, Maryland School of Medicine, which I'll talk about in a second, with the Talent Mentoring Program, and our EOS initiative that supports our AP schools. The Talent Mentoring Program has increased in scope and number of students are supporting, and the number of mentors. These are pre-med or med students who are coming in and supporting our students in accelerated science lessons. The kids are excited. The mentors are excited to be in the schools. And as you can see, last year we supported about 21 schools. This year about 25. Go to the next slide. We also have an opportunity to partner with C2Y. As many of you might be aware, C2Y courses are quite expensive, but they're available free of charge to our students. We had programming last summer, this past summer. We have it for this school year as well. We're able to provide this through a combination of our ESSER dollars and a LEAP grant that we have. And it is providing after school and summer, like a continuous learning for students, and engaging them in the C2Y curriculum. So we'll go into the next. Another sort of newer initiative we've been doing is really thinking about the parents of our gifted, advanced, and talent development learners. Supporting emotional needs of the gifted, SANG, is a training that 50 of our families completed, and in each group completed 8 one-hour-long sessions. There were a variety of topics, including communication, teaching self-management, idealism, family relationships, the complexities of parenting gifted students. And you can see on the right some of the feedback we got, right? We have parents who said, I can now better understand my child, and I have the tools to communicate with them. We're not struggling or thriving all alone. We're learning about ourselves, not just as parents, but as people who learn and grow. So we're really excited about this. We're going to continue to expand this opportunity. And the parents seem to really appreciate it. So we'll continue to update you on how that goes. Go to the next one. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about expanded enrichment and academic opportunities. I'll talk a little, and then I'll move it over to Dennis. So exciting, yay, new this year, is a problem-based learning project pilot. It's a problem-based learning project that provides an integrated problem scenarios based on real-life situations. It's focusing on multiple points of view and opportunities for critical thinking, hands-on situations, and STEM connections. This is the first year. We're going to do it at 16 schools, K through 12. So this is not a specific grade band initiative. We are supporting a comprehensive list of schools without entrance criteria, and we're chosen ranging from elementary to high school in all quadrants of the city. So we have a pretty expanded effort. Okay, next slide. Right, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis. Yep.
Oh, I thanked you before you handed it off. I knew you were going to hand it off. So just quickly want to recap some of the efforts regarding the honors in middle grades and pre-AP pilot. So we're going to start on the right-hand side because that's really the middle grades piece first. Just for context, 8 years ago, fewer than a dozen schools offered at least one honors level course. And we associated that with a lot of the advanced academic schools, which were very small in number. I'm happy to report that, after we did a comprehensive audit, we basically took away all the honors courses from the middle schools that summer, and we basically renormed what the expectations were. So I'm happy to say last year and this year, we have more than 50 schools that are offering at least one honors opportunity. So I just want to put context that advanced academics is not the only show in town, because advanced academics really just means access to honors courses. And we have far more schools offering honors access than just the advanced academic schools. We're many in number and growing. I'm also very excited about Western last year was able to pilot a pre-AP course opportunity for us to help build that AP pipeline. This year they're entering into year 2. You can see at the bottom of that part of the slide, you can see the new courses that are coming on board. I'm also happy to announce that College Board is partnering with us to do a deep dive on the data analysis to survey teachers, to survey students, to survey families, to track to see how that is working for us, because one of the initiatives we might be looking at for next year is expanding pre-AP to a number of high schools across the district, because we want to reduce those barriers to access and increase the opportunities to success. Next slide, please. Speaking of AP data, again, basically where we were a few years ago, we've opened up the doors of access. There can be little question about that. If anyone has any questions, please see me, because that is not our problem. We're still not as successful as we need to be yet, and the last year and a half has been, we can't gauge the level of success that we could be achieving, because they have been abnormal, unique, difficult years to teach a rigorous course like an AP course. But I'm happy, you can see just in the pure numbers, yes, there's a big inflation of numbers. We're at 7,978 students, but that includes the pre-AP kids. But if we took that out, I'd still be at 5,100 unique course registrations, not unique students, because some students take 2, 3, 4 AP courses, but we're doubled the number of seats for AP alone since 2016. So that's a 5-year growth trajectory. And you can see on the right-hand side, just the number of teachers. One of the big things we've always advocated, as a former AP teacher, this resonates true. You can't have a teacher stand in front of a class who's never been trained in AP. And City Schools was never prioritizing that in previous years, or the past 20 years I've been here. But in the past 3 years, we have, and I commend all those on the call today who have joined in that. And right now we have a 95% or higher ratio of teachers that are teaching AP have been trained in the past 5 years. So we're on the right trajectory of making sure we have quality instructors helping our students be as successful as possible. Next slide. Laura, do you want to wrap this up?
Sure, happy to. So what are our next steps? So as it relates to identification, we're going to infuse analogical reasoning into pre-K and K curricula. So what we found through a pilot is that if students are exposed to analogical reasoning prior to a nonverbal assessment, we see higher rates of identification, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see. Personalized learning, we integrate individualized learning plans into student learning plans. We're going to continue that. We're going to continue to learn from it through the implementation of it and make sure it's fully aligned, and that for teachers it's seamless, and for students it's seamless. And then secondary education initiatives, pre-AP evaluation and targeted expansion of AP coursework, art, world languages, capstone, so AP seminar and AP research. So these are amazing courses that we're able to offer that we think expanding could create even more opportunities for students. So I think we're wrapping up, unless Mark or Dr. Dabrowski have anything to add, and we're opening up for questions.
The only thing I'll add is when I was in the ILED role, I remember the momentum starting to build around the work that Dennis was doing, not just around gifted students, but advanced academics, and kind of making this something that is more frequently noticed in schools. And so the eGate banner started to come up. And I just wanted to publicly, celebrate this work and give Dennis a shout out, because he's like a team of 1.5, sometimes 2. And to get us to this place in a short period of time is really commendable. So, Dennis, you've done it. I'll try to tell you this as much as I can, but I want to do it publicly. You've really shifted a lot of mindsets around this work, and I think you've done it in a very respectable and gradual way. So tipping my cap to you and beg and ask and plead you continue to keep your foot on the gas, because our students are waiting for it. And we're closing the ground a lot faster now to make sure we're reaching the students that need this work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the kind words, Mark. And the team is officially up to 4 people, so it's great. But you're right. There were some years it was 1.5. Commissioner Griffin?
Yes. Hello. one, thank you so much for this presentation. It definitely warms my heart to hear more about this program. I was a product of what we just called GATE when I was in school. And so like understanding how much more access there is for a lot of the pathways into GATE, and where it can take you really makes me excited. I'm particularly excited about the pre-AP work and the middle school honors work. That's really important to me because I often heard from students when I was teaching and working in middle schools that they didn't have a lot of options for folks who needed extended learning. Like they needed more. They would finish early and were ready to discover more learning. And so I'm excited to see that that's been included in the work that we're doing. I'm also happy to see that we're moving in the right direction, especially for the talent development piece, as far as the equity indicators, right? And so in my mind, I'm kind of starting to get the wheels turning about how can we move those other areas continuously in the right direction and maybe even increase the rate at which we're meeting or exceeding those expectations. And then I just wanted to throw out there that I hope that this is also something to be included on that resource map that I had asked for earlier in the year when we were in budgeting season. It was like, what kind of programs, activities, community partnerships are schools using? And that way we can see like which schools have what. I would love to see this included in that map, an overlay of which schools are utilizing which one of those community partners you all listed, and maybe how many students in each of those schools. I'm just curious about the numbers. And then which one of our schools, just looking at the map, I would say, have the middle school programs, because it shows us kind of more of this visual representation or distribution of where our work is going across the city. And I would be really curious to see that. And I think that this is a really important piece because we have to make sure we're meeting all of our students where they are, like we started our conversation today, and taking them further. That's the best part.
Just if I could just answer one part of that, if I could, Commissioner Griffin. When I mentioned we would be doing those analogies in classes to improve identification, I will say we had one school, and I'm not going to name the school just for the purposes of the students, where prior to doing the analogy activities, we had one student identified. And after we did, and it's very short, they're very short, we are exposing them to these analogical reasonings. It was 8 students identified that next year in that class. So it's a small shift that could make a huge difference. There's a lot of other things that can make a huge difference, but I just wanted to point out that's why we clearly articulated that in next steps, because we believe, based on the evidence we've collected in doing that could make that small shift can make a huge difference.
Yeah, thank you so much for reiterating that. And it is really about the way that it's shifting the way that we think about how we evaluate whether a student is gifted or not, right? And it's even changing some of that language that we use in that. So that's another piece that has me very excited. So thank you for that story, so I can really tie those two pieces together.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin and folks. Commissioner Cheney, I did see your hand raised as well. Chair Emeritus.
Yes, I actually want to ditto both Mr. Etienne and Commissioner Griffin's comments. Thank you to Dennis for the work that's been done. It's been amazing moving through the years on the board just to see the expansion of the work. And so I want to congratulate you for that, and thank you for helping to the point that was just made. Tell the story that a district that may be one that's considered having a large number of students that are poverty does not mean that we don't have a large number of students that are gifted. And so this is a story that I think we really need to be touting much more than we do. And I know you do a lot with that, but thank you so much for that effort, and we'll continue to support as we move ahead.
Thank you so much. And I was just at a state meeting this morning with the Advisory Council on Gifted Education, that is an advisory council to the state superintendent. And they remarked again how impressive it is that Baltimore City, I don't know how to take this, but that Baltimore City has individualized learning plans. That really does set us apart from other districts. We're trying to meet students where they are. We talked earlier about meeting people where they are, which should be a foregone conclusion, but we are putting into action, and I commend the members of the board who helped to enact the policy and regulations almost a year ago today, because this is where we need to be. So thank you all for that as well.
And it's certainly great to have partners like David Steiner here who can also help tell the story, right? Because it takes our entire community to actually do that, so that our kids need that hope, right? So if they're constantly hearing, negative press, it's important for our young people to hear the positive things. And also, to Commissioner Chinya's point, this also can serve as a way to encourage more students to participate in gifted and talented and advanced academic learning. So I appreciate that. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Great job in terms of the presentation. I really like the part, I guess it's been chimed in earlier, about the number of partnerships and how they've been elevated. Two things come to mind for me. You said that now you're basically at more than 50 schools. So it gets to me in terms of the whole idea, because I've always worried about the concentration, how the concentration of gifted and talented kids tend to be at few schools. So how have we done in terms of the diffusion and dispersion of the schools, of the kids in various neighborhoods, various schools, and various populations? Because me growing up, it tend to be a small group that got the benefit. Looks like you guys are starting to spread the wealth. And I guess another thing that's really important, page 36, you talk about, you define gifted, talented in the other third module. I would recommend that you put that early in the slides so people won't ask themselves, what does gifted mean? What does talent mean? Because I was doing that until I got to that part of the slide and said, oh, I got it now. Even though you told me that about a year ago. So I'm just reiterating the fact that you may want to put in a slide for the people that don't know, like me. But I guess my question is, how have we done in terms of diffusion and dispersion of the gifted and talent?
Yeah, let me address that first by saying that as of last year's policy and regulations, we have students in every single school that are identified as either gifted, advanced, or talent development. Every school in Baltimore City Schools is expected to serve the needs of formally identified learners. Every school is expected to do universalist screening. So it's not that we have 50 schools that we have specialized programming in. We largely don't do programming. What we do is we bring in resources through K through 5 in particular that are meant to be used in a heterogeneous classroom. So every student in every corner of our district is expected to be able to access that. Those who have schools that have larger clusters of students, yes, they can do some pull-out or push-in programming, things like that with K through 5. The 50 schools, Commissioner, that you mentioned, those are schools that are offering honors courses. They're not just the playground of the gifted, but previous to that, we only had a handful of schools, that even were offering honors or advanced academics. So if you were gifted at school X, but that was not part of the 6 schools that the district had, you got nothing. There was no honors opportunity. There's no way to feed you. So as of last year and this year, we still have 54 actually, but we'll say 50 plus schools, and they're very wide flung. I mean, they're Violetville and Glenmount and Arlington and Armstead Gardens. I mean, there really is a diverse range of the schools that are offering it. I would offer for future consideration as the math leads give you presentations or the ELA leads, inquire about their status of the honors programming of the stuff that they're doing as well, because they own that work. They're part and parcel to the success of that story. It's not just the gifted office. Yes, we push the audit and we push the renorming, but they own the day-to-day operations of that. So, it should be part and parcel of presentations they do to think about where are they expanding, where are their next opportunities to bring honors social studies, honors science, honors ELA, or honors mathematics in it. But we're pretty widespread. And I do want to just say, again, every school is expected to serve the needs of gifted. So it's not like some districts where like you're at a gifted school or a tag center. Every school is expected to be a GAL site, much like every school is expected to be a special education site. Some schools have greater populations than others. We have atypical learners, meet them in their need and then feed them.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Forgive me, everyone. Thank you for that, though. If there are any additional questions or no additional questions, Commissioner Griffin, do you still have a question? I see your hand up still.
No, let me lower my hand. Thanks for letting me know it was still up.
Folks, we really appreciate the presentation, the information, and we look forward to seeing how this continues to evolve through the pandemic, but also as we prepare for years to come. So thank you all for this work. Mr. Etienne, just stand by. We may have a brief, just a brief overview of this. Dennis, maybe with you also at the next public meeting. So just look out for that potentially. Okay, thank you all. We're now ready for Home and Hospital Program Health Services Update. I see Dr. Fink there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm actually going to kick this one off. I'm Sarah Warren, Executive Director for Whole Child Services and Support, and it is my distinct honor to be able to introduce members of my team today. I think that when we talk about student wholeness, we often think particularly about things like social emotional learning and mental health, but there's this whole big bucket of work that our team does as well, which you will hear more about today. It does include that work around mental health, and we've got our expert here, Ashley Collins, to talk with you about that. But it also involves our work with getting teachers out into hospitals and homes, our homeless services, our work for chronically health impaired students, and many more. So before I go on to introduce the team, I just want to briefly touch on the two key priority areas that are aligned to the board's strategic priorities. So priority 1 and priority 5 are the ones that we have identified as being particularly well aligned to this work that you'll hear about today. We don't have all members of the team. This is actually quite a large team. Many of you know Dr. Fink. She's a legend in her own time. And you will also hear, in addition to Dr. Fink, you'll hear today from Ms. Janet Lippman and Ashley Collins. But please know that there are many more people in this team behind this powerful group of women who are really working quietly to serve students every day and to make sure in some cases that some particularly vulnerable students are still having the opportunity to access a quality education. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Fink.
Good afternoon, everybody. Trying to get my picture to come up, doesn't want to do that. So I guess you'll have to do without seeing me. My name is Louise Fink, and I'm the Director of Home and Hospital and Health Services. It is a real pleasure to be with you today to share the scope of work and achievements of the Home and Hospital Health Services segment of the Office of the Whole Child. Our work touches the most vulnerable members of our school community, and our dedicated staff works to meet their varied needs. Last fall, as we began to return to school, the first teachers who returned were the hospital teachers who felt that their students would be unavailable for virtual learning. We served homeless students, monitored portfolios for homeschooled students, provided mental health support, provided nurses for our most medically fragile students, and of course provided home teaching for students whose medical conditions prevented them from attending school, and we taught the students in the hospital. We also provided services to pregnant and parenting students, and services through our CHIP program, chronically health impaired for students who had to miss schools, sometimes for a medical condition. This year, we have had a daily escalating number of parents who are requesting home teaching or homeschooling. Our teachers are providing home services. We provided camp programs for homeless students and additional on-site services at the shelters for a camp program for students who are not in the regular camp program. In addition, we monitor and support the immunization program for the entire district. And if we look at our numbers here, the numbers are very impressive. We have taken care of over 15,000 of our most medically fragile, most needing students in the system. Through all these programs that are listed here, I'm not going to ask you to watch them all over again, but we have taken behavioral health, we have taken substance abuse surgeons, we have done immunizations, all these different things that make the system work And sometimes they make it work very quietly, very unobtrusively to keep things from getting out of hand. I'm going to turn it over now to Janet Lippman.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janet Lippman, and I am coordinator for the Home and Hospital program. I'd like to explain to you some of the specifics for the Home and Hospital program. All students enrolled in city schools in grades K through 12 are eligible for the service. It is determined by a medical application that must be signed by the parent and verified by the student's healthcare provider. Once that's done, the healthcare provider must also include the fact how long the student will be unable to attend school. Once that process is completed, the students are assigned teachers that work with them in the home, and the medical team does continuance every 60 days for that application. Dr. Fink touched a little bit about our hospital teachers. We're very proud in how during the height of the pandemic, our hospital teachers chose to continue to provide in-person learning with PPE support from each of their hospitals. The hospital services are provided in designated city hospitals for all students that are inpatient. We have a reciprocal agreement with the other LEAs for their students when they are inpatient in the hospital. So our teachers also service that population. Next slide, please. Currently, our home teaching data has grown quite a bit since September 24th. We are now at 142 students that have been approved for the home teaching services. Last school year, as you can see, that was the year of the pandemic, and we had a smaller number of students to be served. Next slide, please. All right, our chronic health impaired program is a program, it's called CHIP, that services provided to students who are absent intermittently due to a chronic illnesses. We also provide that same service to pregnant and parenting teams who provide the appropriate medical documentation. Currently, we have 144 students on CHIP, and last school year was 407. But in previous years, our numbers have been much higher, and they're growing daily. Next slide, please. Our homeschooling program is designed to monitor families who are providing instruction to their children as mandated by COMAR. These students are no longer enrolled in city schools, and the numbers are increasing tremendously. Currently, we have 2,282 students. And as you can see from school year 1920 to 2021, it's been growing substantially. Next slide. Okay, Louise.
Yes. So one of the programs that our office monitors is the Autism Waiver Program. Many years ago, parents of students who were autistic went to the federal government and said, look, you're spending all this money to institutionalize our children. We want to take care of our own children. And so the Autism Waiver was created. Currently, we have about 100 students on the waiver, and they are students who are require a lot of care and a lot of intervention. Our team is monitored regularly by the Maryland Department of Health, and they received a 100% on their audit findings this year. So we were very, very proud of them and very proud that they're continuing to do that. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Ashley to pick up the next slide. Ashley Collins, who is our wonderful mental health coordinator.
Hi, good afternoon, Ashley Collins. So the Expanded School Behavior Health Program is a community partnership. We currently have 5 partners that were selected through a competitive procurement. And they embed licensed mental health and substance use disorder clinicians into city schools, expanding the behavioral health services already offered within the structure of other city school programs. So we wanted to highlight some of the things that we did last year. We were able to, when things changed and the pandemic came, we were able to switch the program from in-person to telehealth. And we were able to continue to provide prevention, early intervention, and treatment services to the 131 schools that we serve. And the numbers for last year are listed on the slide. You can see we had almost 7,000 students. This current year, we're already up to 1,634 students are receiving services. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about updates for this year. We would love to be able to add an additional 15 full-time clinician positions. And while we're being flexible and responsive to the increased mental health needs of our students and families, we are hitting some roadblocks due to a shortage of social workers. So next slide, please.
Okay, we have a homeless coordinator who at a later date will be presenting on our services, but our numbers of homeless students is escalating daily. We're up over 3,200 students right now, and they have provided some amazing services this year. We have provided vouchers for them for clothing, and we'll provide second vouchers at the beginning of the second semester because as we discovered, kids do grow. What you buy in September is not going to fit you in January. We also provided a summer camp program. Being homeless and being in a shelter without a place to go can be even worse than just being homeless and in a shelter during the summer. So we provided both an outdoor camp and we provided camp on the sites of some of the programs. We provide transportation to homeless students to get them back to their school of origin. We are advocates for homeless students and advocates to make sure that homeless students get the services they need and the services they need to be successful. And finally, one of the things we've been able to do is serve on a number of the committees. Alan Blackwell, who's our homeless coordinator, serves on one of the mayor's councils for the homeless, and I serve on the committee for the Journey Home, which is another outreach from the mayor's office to make sure that we are all working together to make sure that homeless students are getting what they need both in school and when they're out of school. Next slide, please. One of the other things our office is responsible is for immunization data. Every year we work very, very hard to get parents who are somewhat recalcitrant about getting their kids immunized to be immunized. Our compliance number has jumped since last Friday to 98%, but we still are working very hard to get all of our students immunized. This year we've had additional problems with getting students immunized because many parents are still afraid to leave the house, and the same parents who are afraid to leave their house to come to school are afraid to leave the house to take their children to be immunized. We work with a number of partners, Mount Washington, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, and the behavioral health office that's working out of the medical Office of Medical Services. Next slide, please. One of the other things we've been working on through the office is the COVID-19 vaccine, and the Baltimore City Health Department and Baltimore City Public Schools is making sure that we are going to be able to provide the vaccine to the children 5 years and up once that is put into place. And then we worked right from the beginning to provide a vaccine for our teachers and staff. And as soon as we get the approval for the COVID vaccine for the children 5 years and over, we'll be working with that program as well. Next slide, please. Okay, we have a significant number of students who require additional nursing services. The health suites and health department take care of our nursing services. So the Baltimore City Health Department is responsible for staffing in the 155 school health suites and school-based health centers. Currently, we still have 9 health suites. That's also gone up since the day that we set this one up. We do not have the regular nursing services here. We are actively recruiting nurses through the health department and through our contractual services. Anybody on the call who knows a nurse who would like a job, please call the health department or call me. We will work with you to get you assigned and hired immediately. Next slide, please. And then our private duty nurses, so far this year, they are serving 80 students who have very, very difficult things. The number keeps going up every day also. And we have 67 students who are waiting for nurses. So one of the things that we are concerned about is the fact that we have students with needs and students who need things to happen for them, and we are not able to find the services that we need to give them because nursing services have been very difficult to obtain during the pandemic. And so we're working very hard to make sure that we will have nurses for all of our students. Next slide. Thank you all. This is our contact information here. We'd be very happy to take any questions. Thank you all for listening, and thank you all for being the wonderful team that you are.
Thank you, Dr. Fink. Thank you to your team and everyone there. Commissioners, I'll take questions if any of you have them. And I see Chair Emeritus, her hand is up. So Commissioner Chenya.
Yeah, sorry, but and thank you, Dr. Fink. You mentioned the work that was being done in terms of trying to get additional nurses. Ms. Collins mentioned something about social worker shortages. What is happening, to try to fill that particular vacancy and that need?
When our private contractors are looking for additional people to fill the positions that were just authorized, and right now, because of the mental health needs that have grown across the city and state, there are less people available than there used to be, but we're working very hard to fill those positions. One of the things that COVID has done is really put a lot of different positions into shortages. The social workers, teachers, nurses, people that were formerly working with children in our school system and have become less available as we worked along.
Okay. I know that we probably, and I know this is, I'm pretty sure we've already done it, but are we doing any kind of partnering with the school, school of social work, that those schools that are in Baltimore, as well as nursing schools?
Yes, we are partnering. We are partnering with the School of Social Work. The School of Social Work is working with our Related Services Office to provide social work trainees, and we are working on a partnership currently with Johns Hopkins School of Nursing that we hope will be ready to provide some additional nurses for us. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And again, thank you for the work that you do. It's a tremendous amount of work. As you said, it's always been done very quietly, but very efficiently and effectively in the background. So thank you.
And I might add there that one of the things that happens is I was listening to Justin talking, and one of the things that was happening is that these are the students who are the most needy. And very often we want to make very, very sure that they are not overlooked as we try to do all the programs for the other students, because every student is valuable. And the goal of our office, the Office of Home and Hospital and Health Services, is to make sure that we don't leave any students out.
Thank you, Dr. Fink. I'm trying to pull up the immunization data, and it seems like we're in better shape with compliance than we have been over the past couple of years. Is there anything that we can say attributes to that? Because I know with this year particularly, I think about as you all know, I'm in middle school, right? So 7th grade is a year where many students have to have in a lot of their required immunizations or vaccinations. And so I think about last year was a very interesting year because students weren't physically present in our buildings for the most part. But even with that, it seems as if we've had more students than we've had in recent years to make sure that their immunization records are up to date. So is there any actions or practices on our part that improve this, or is it just happened that way?
No, we've been working with many of our partners in the community, Mount Washington Pediatric, Johns Hopkins Bayview, and some of the other, the KIPP school have been giving immunizations to children over the summer. We started the campaign very early this year, and we're working very hard for it. We're doing better than we did, but we still hope to get to that 99% that we get to every year. Every year there's going to be some students who don't get immunized. There are some students who are exempted from immunizations, like the students who are homeless. We're never allowed to exclude a student who's homeless from school because they're not immunized. And in addition, we do have students who have religious and medical exemptions. But so far this year, we've been making a lot of phone calls, contacting a lot of people, and working very hard to see if we can get to that number that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and generally by the 1st, I see in those in 2020 and 19, that's early September, right? But the information that we received is the 24th of September. I think it's a little bit more time for us to get those immunizations in, but it's still good work. And
Now, as of this morning, we were up at a little bit over 98%, and
okay.
We're trying to get it. The percentages sound good, but the percentages still reflect over 1,000 students who aren't immunized. So we're trying very, very hard to get them. The state of Maryland is, I'm not saying it's unique, but it's one of the few states that has tied immunizations to the idea of your child count. So a child who's not immunized, who doesn't have an appropriate recognized exemption, is not counted. So we work very, very hard because that's one of our efforts to make sure that the system is able to get the revenue that it needs.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Fink. Colleagues, are there any additional questions or clarifying thoughts for the team?
Mr. McFadden, I'm sorry, if I could just add one more thing. I appreciate you recognizing the hard work that's been done around the immunizations. I do just want to make sure it's very clear for the public that we're still pushing, right? We really need to get that last 1,000 plus students immunized as quickly as possible. So the state gave us a 45-day extension this year to give us a little bit more time to get those students immunized and in the system before they are legally supposed to be excluded from school. So they gave us a little bit of that reprieve, and we're working really hard, as Dr. Fink pointed out, with community partners and through direct outreach to families to get through that list. But I just want to make sure it's clear. We really do need everybody to go out and get those immunizations. And, you know, because of the push around COVID immunizations and vaccinations, sometimes the regular immunizations get forgotten a little bit. So we just want to make sure to keep that at the top of everybody's radar screen.
That's right, completely. Any other thoughts, clarifying thoughts, questions? Well, thanks, team, for the great work that is being done. Thank you for just everything that you all are doing, especially now. And we look forward to hearing, we get this update every year, but we look forward to partnering with staff to make sure that our students are well. So thank you all so much for the great work. Thank you. We are going to move on to our R3 update. I'm going to ask everyone who is not presenting to just make sure you're muted. There are a few folks that are still not muted. So I want to make sure that we're muted so that we avoid any feedback and we can hear the presentation. Chief Dabrowski, Dr. Dabrowski, it is all yours. And I see your team. So good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Commissioner McFadden. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joan Dabrowski, Chief Academic Officer. Excited to share this afternoon an update related to our Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine work. We are going to talk this afternoon about a word I've been saying a lot in recent months, acceleration. We're excited to be able to share with the board and with the public more information about it and to really provide an introduction of that phrase, accelerated learning, and to learn about what that looks like here in city schools at this early phase of implementation. We're going to share with you some of the initial professional learning work we've done with our educators and highlight the next phase of support and development. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just as a reminder of where this fits in our work of our 3 Rs. So you can see at the bottom level where our key strategies, right there in the middle, we've highlighted it in pink, is this work of acceleration. On the next slide, you're going to see again where we are aligning all of the work of our 3 Rs with the strategic priorities from our board. And while acceleration is in itself its own priority that you see there, acceleration is also very closely connected with personalized learning because it requires a level of really looking closely at what individual students need in order to access that grade level content. And so with that, I am going to turn this presentation over to Mark Etienne, Executive Director for Teaching and Learning.
Good evening, everyone. Mark Etienne, Executive Director, Teaching and Learning. Very excited to engage in the dialogue this evening about acceleration. There's a lot of work we've been doing A couple things first I just want to use to frame before we go into deeply. First, when we say accelerate, I want to be very clear. We're talking about all students being able to accelerate from where they are to grade level and beyond. And that goes for every single student in our district, whether they have a disability or whether they are gifted or whether they are any type of ism. Every single student should be challenged to accelerate to grade level and beyond. This is not just a term that we're using for students that are below grade level. And then secondly, this is a very new endeavor for us. And so we're very much still in progress of finding both the best ways to support schools and the development of our model. And so you'll hear about that as we continue on this afternoon. I'd love to take a moment to introduce a very important partner of ours, Dr. David Steiner. He is the executive director of the Hopkins Institute for Educational Policy. But more importantly, he's been our partner for some time now, not just for our acceleration work, and knows Baltimore intimately and has helped us think about the right way to take the concept of acceleration and apply it in our immediate context with our immediate resources and everything else that we have. So I'm going to ask him to kind of share at a high level what he shared with us around his research, around the research he found around the country in acceleration, and how we've begun to partner to build our own model to help accelerate all of our students to grade level and beyond. Thank you for being with us this evening, Dr. Steiner. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, commissioners. Good to share some time with you. I've had the privilege of meeting a couple of you, but would love to get to know more of you. It is my privilege to work with Baltimore, where I live and have lived. This is my 7th year here, coming down here having served as Commissioner of Education for New York State. And many of the things I'm sharing with you this afternoon are as a result of seeing historic achievement gaps among students right across the nation. And of course, that is something that is tragic for children and tragic for our country. So next slide. Let's move straight into the slides if we can, Mark. So as all of you know, we entered COVID with learning gaps. No news to anybody. COVID made this worse. Again, no news, but I wanted to put some real numbers to what we're all facing. If you look at this is 3rd grade, and on the right is mathematics, on the left is reading. I'm going to focus on mathematics for a moment. We're talking here about Baltimore schools, of course, more than 50% African American. They went in as a nation with competency and proficiency rates that were at 30%. Across the nation, our best data is that we've had a 14% decrease in proficiency for this population. We're now at 16% in the United States. Putting it differently, 85% of our African American youth are not proficient in mathematics at 3rd grade. And this is obviously deeply, deeply worrying. I would say also that since these are national data, and this is a number that simply reflects over 50% African American, we may expect our own challenges to be even deeper. It is interesting that the decrease in reading was not as substantial as in mathematics. We believe that's because math is so much a matter of specific skills and understanding specific concepts, whereas there is some background support for children as they get older in terms of their vocabulary, for example, whether they are in formal education or not, but they are down, of course, also in ELA. So that is what we face. And this is a large sample from the providers of iReady, the diagnostic assessment that is used in Baltimore. So this is a directly relevant set of statistics. Next slide. So historically, and I've heard you share this phrase before, we have tried to meet students where they are. And when they are well behind, we've tended to use one of these strategies, sometimes in combination. We've held them back a year and asked them to repeat. We have pushed them forward, regardless of their academic performance, and essentially said, well, you can advance a grade, but we're going to remediate you. We are going to teach again all the material that you didn't have an opportunity to learn in the past. And whether it is retention or social promotion plus remediation, The track record has been universally a failure. I'm being very blunt with all of you because no point in beating around the bush. It's one of the few things that educational researchers, notoriously difficult to get them to agree about much, but they absolutely agree about this. In fact, nationally, the gaps as grade levels progress, the gaps between our more affluent students and our students who are disadvantaged gets worse. Remediation is, in fact, not helping. Next slide. And so we are going to really buck the trend here and not do again what we know has failed our kids. We are instead going to say the past is the past. We cannot keep going backwards and trying to fill deeper and deeper holes in student learning because we know it doesn't work. It really depresses the student, the holes get deeper, and they come to the next year even further behind. What acceleration is to say we are going to look forward, not backward. We are going to draw a line in the sand and we're going to say our target as a community, as schools, as classrooms, is to prepare our children for the next grade level unit of instruction. We are going to do whatever it takes to equip them with just those skills they need to be able to understand that forthcoming grade level lesson. Yes, there will be material, sadly, they never get to recover, but so much better that they focus on key learning standards that are appropriate to their grade level than to go backwards and never, ever catch up. Could I ask people to mute if they, I think a couple of folks aren't muted. Might help everyone here. Thank you so much. So we do look forward and not backwards. We look to elevate and lift our students towards the future, not remediate them towards the past. Next slide. To put these side by side, the real problem with remediation is the way it works. It says, well, we're going to try to recover all of that lost learning. It can only do so by taking time out of the children's current learning to try to reteach. What you're telling children is that while their peers are moving ahead, they are standing still, right? And that is a totally depressing message. They are segregated. They are often treated as tier 3, and they never escape tier 3. This is tracking with a vengeance. Once remediated, sadly, always remediated. Across the nation, and this is stunning, some 20% of our African American students have never, I repeat, never been exposed to grade level materials because they have been remediated since 3rd grade. And they have always been given simplified, watered down material that has pushed them further and further behind. Acceleration says enough already. We are going to prepare you for what the nation knows you need for success in career and tertiary education. We are going to draw a line in the sand. Next slide. Does it work? We already had, of course, some research, but this is brand new. This is a few weeks old. This is from one of the best math curriculums, Zern, and Baltimore has used Zern along with Eureka. Zern did an online treatment of some 22,000 students taking its curriculum and divided the group into those who had been remediated in the traditional way and those who were accelerated. The graphic is a little complex, but let me make it clear. The closer you are to that dotted line in 2020, 2021, the closer you are to zeroing out the impact of COVID. In other words, if that line had gone back to the baseline of 0, those students who were treated with the intervention would have lost nothing from COVID. The line going upwards, right, means more struggle with math. It means more failure, more struggle, less success in the grade level instruction. As you can see, in 2019, 2020, right, when the pandemic began, all students were struggling more, unsurprisingly, right? They were being faced with remote learning. They were having problems with access to hardware, software, etc. Then those who were accelerated almost zeroed out their learning loss. Those who were remediated got worse and worse and further behind in terms of their math skills. This is very powerful real-time data from this experience that the nation has been through, and I think makes it so clear why we are committed to acceleration as a strategy. Next slide. This is the saddest slide I need to share with you, but it speaks to, very frankly, to the institutional racism that we all face in this country. What this slide says is that there are a whole number of African American and Hispanic students in this country who are being remediated even when they are on grade level, and that they are far more likely to be remediated when they're on grade level, right, when they're poor and of color than when they're white. In other words, we have a situation in this country where we are looking at the color of a student's skin and saying, we don't care how well they do, right? We know they need remediation. That is one of the saddest things that I have to report. Acceleration not only says no to that, it says, as Mark and Joan mentioned, that we are going to look at the human being and say to that human being, that child, our promise to you is to move you forward to that grade level and beyond, right? If you have the capacity to get beyond, we will support you. We are not going to treat you because of the color of your skin or the economics of your parents or your community. We want to know where you are and we want to bring you forward. Next slide. So how do we do this, right? What are the action steps? First, we've got to stop using stuff off Pinterest, Google, and Teachers Pay Teachers, right? This kind of stuff that teachers were pulling off the internet, 80% of it, 80%, turned out to be below grade level. So all it was remediation by another name. And this was happening in classroom after classroom, and still is, by the way, across the country. Fortunately, Baltimore has embraced high-quality instructional materials. It is already moving to support that instruction with PD that you've been told about, and it is well ahead of many, many districts in this regard, right? Teachers know that the target is to teach Eureka Math, is to teach Wit and Wisdom ELA. These are absolutely outstanding curriculum, and if they are taught, students will be on track, right, for college and career. Secondly, professional development has to be real and aligned to those materials. Generic professional development, let's get better at teaching math, we know from research has almost no impact, sadly, because it's done all over the country and we waste billions of dollars on it. I need to know as a teacher how to teach Eureka Math to 6th grade. If I'm a math 6th grader in Baltimore, 6th grade teacher, how to use Eureka most effectively for my children. Then, and this is newer, we need diagnostic data to actually find out where children are, right? What skills they need to access the grade level material in Eureka, in Wit and Wisdom. I'll come back to that moment. This is the thermometer. This is how we know where the child is. We cannot accelerate their learning from nowhere in particular. We have to accelerate their learning from where we know they are. And finally, we have to design, and this is where Mark and others, so many wonderful colleagues, Aquella and Joan and others come in and their teams, and I've had a privilege of working with them over the last few months. We support acceleration with multiple adults working together in the school and beyond. Next slide. So let us keep going and probably move past that slide, Mark.
Yep.
Great. So let me lay this out in very strong and clear, I hope, clear terms. First, we cannot take children who are 2 years behind grade level and pretend that we're going to get them ready for every one of those 60 standards in grade 7. I'm just giving this as an example, right? It's just too much. The good news is this country tries to teach far too much in far too shallow a way. All the international data shows that we do mile-wide, inch-deep instruction. As many of you know, I think. Korea, Japan, countries that do very well teach fewer topics in more depth. The children truly understand them, and then they can actually apply the knowledge to new situations. So Baltimore, and this is being done across the country by reform-minded districts, has worked with national organizations to prioritize the key standards. And I want to be very clear here. It doesn't mean watering those standards down in any way at all. It means picking the most important learning goals at that grade level and saying, these are the ones we're going to focus on. These are the ones we're going to accelerate our children to learn. Then we have to pre-identify the skills that our children need for their lessons, their grade level lessons. That is where the diagnostic assessment comes in, right? It is no use to me or to you or to a teacher or to a principal or to a parent saying your child is struggling in math. That's unlikely to be news, very frankly. What we need to say is, next week, your young child is going to be doing a lesson on dividing fractions. Our diagnostic tells us that the crucial prerequisite is they have to be able to subtract and add whole numbers. They are showing us in the diagnostic that they are having trouble with one of those skills. We will teach them that skill laser-like in the next week so that they can access that grade level instruction. And as you can hear in my voice in that last very long sentence, I've actually covered this arrow from the beginning to the end. In other words, we've chosen the standard we're going to teach to, that grade level standard. We've given the diagnostic assessment, and there's good news in Baltimore. Those diagnostic assessments can come in math right from the curriculum that is being used, straight from Eureka. We can do the diagnostic and say, this child or this group of children needs to focus on these prerequisite skills right away so that next week or 2 weeks from now, they're ready for the grade level lesson. We will then pre-teach those set of skills using tutoring, using after-school small groups, using in-school small groups, using the first 30 minutes of a learning block to focus on the differentiated instruction those children need. And we may have several adults working together on that, right? It may be a couple of teachers, maybe a resident from the urban teaching program. It may be a teacher who is working with the coaches. It may be your intervention specialists, all of us together with the same data, working on the same prerequisite skills, all to support that grade level core instruction. So the teacher knows that this is a team effort to get those children ready, so she does not have to go backwards. So she does not have to pull insulting materials off Pinterest. So she can give that world-class instruction that is embedded in these rigorous, high-quality curriculum. Next slide.
That's exactly right. Could I jump in here, Dr. Steiner?
Please.
All right. If you could just go back one slide, I just want to add some more specific strategies we put into place so that the board and the public understand how we've customized this process to our district's approach. And so the prioritized standards piece, back in the spring when we first, or I should say in the winter, when we first went into the pandemic, not last year, but I guess it was the spring the year before, Student Achievement Partners, the leading nonprofit agency around the Common Core standards, released guidance on what the most important standards were in literacy and mathematics, open source to the whole country. And so our curriculum partners took that guidance and reorganized the curriculum so that we focused and prioritized the most important, most specific standards that our children should engage in. And they named those kind of lesson plans, as they reformatted them, as the Learn Anywhere plans. And they created multiple modalities and resources for teachers to be able to take what was originally a full year curriculum that is now being condensed and be able to implement that with support. And so we implemented that in the spring when the pandemic first hit, and we continue to use that structure. In other words, our current curriculum already has the prioritized standards that are most important for students at every grade level to move forward. Coming into this year, and we partnered with Dr. Steiner to learn the acceleration process and what will be most important for our students. We dug in each of the content areas to figure out what are those prerequisites for the prioritized standards and how can we make those available to teachers. And so we created these field guides for our schools to be able to identify, using our curricular resources, where can you find those prerequisite standards so that teachers don't have to go into 100 different places to look for them. They can easily be found and implemented in their planning. A key note on diagnostic assessment for those of you who are, I know Commissioner McFadden, you teach and others teach as well. We have multiple assessments in our system. And when we talk about diagnosing in the context of acceleration, we're specifically talking about within the curriculum, within those prerequisite skills, where are our students? What do they need in order to access grade level content? That's a little bit different than when we talk about using diagnostic assessments like iReady and Amplify that assess at a much higher level when they're assessing for grade level and different domains of performance for students. Those assessments are also valuable. In the context of acceleration, we're looking to see which prerequisite skills are our students falling down on so that we can engage in that specific prerequisite teaching during instruction to ensure that they have access to the grade level content. And then lastly, when we think about structures of support, Dr. Steiner hit it on the head. I think our greatest challenge, and I believe it will be our greatest victory, is ensuring that at every school level, there is a cohesive unit of adults that share information, that share data, that work collaboratively for every single student. And so some of you may have heard of the student learning plan. And in our last teaching learning meeting, you heard from the team that put that student learning plan together. It's an example of one of the structures of support where we know for every student what their learning style is, the history of their background in terms of what they may have enjoyed or not enjoyed in school, what schools they've been to, if they have a plan besides an IEP plan or any other plan, so that the teacher has a full comprehensive picture of the student. And we're bringing in other structures as well. And so later on in October and early November, we'll be launching our tutoring initiative. We'll be able to provide high dosage tutors to students that are in the most struggle area of our data and have attendance data that match so that we can impact the students that are showing up every day. And for students who aren't coming every day, we can find other ways to support them. And we also have extended time. We're going to have an extended period of the day where we'll be able to reach students as well. And so we have multiple structures of support. We have a system to be able to diagnose where a student is and then be able to match them within the curriculum, all in support of grade level instruction. So I wanted to just add some nuance and some detail to the process that Dr. Steiner laid out. If you could go to the next slide, please. And so here, I just want to walk through the timeline of how we've done this work. And so in the beginning of July, Dr. Steiner met with the initial team, Chief Dabrowski, to kind of share the research. And we started brainstorming the best way to bring this to our educators here in city schools. And so we created, Aquila James and I created an accelerated work group where we had a launch meeting. We built the work group to just think about how could we begin to implement acceleration in city schools. We did a lot of brainstorming. We received a lot of guidance from Dr. Steiner, and we came up with the arrow that you just saw on the previous slide and a couple of other pieces that we could add to it. And so we came to the school leadership teams, the principals, assistant principals, and their lead teachers at both the Leadership Institute and the CEO Institute to kind of share what we found, share those guides that I mentioned where they could see how in the curriculum the prioritized standards are identified, where the prerequisite skills are, and how they could think about beginning the first 30 days of instruction. And then in our first systemic PDs, we cleared space to give teachers an opportunity to get to know their students, to get to look at the data that was available for them, to see where their students were, so they could begin to formulate those student learning plans and start to create the structures they need to meet every student where they are. As we move forward into October and November, we want to step back and take a look at the data that we're going to be collecting to get a sense of where students are and what would be the right approaches based on the students' performance. And so we're looking to go back into schools. We're trying to figure out how, because we still want to be very sensitive to a lot of what schools are dealing with health and safety protocols, so that we can observe teachers in their planning, we can observe students in their learning, and do so in a way that's productive and supportive of teachers and doesn't feel very invasive. We want to take a hard look at our data to see where students are performing and see if we can identify in the curriculum what we're noticing around the first months of instruction, as well as with our Amplify and iReady and other assessments to see if we're making progress to grade level. And I think that as we do this, another great asset that we've been able to procure is with Dr. Steiner. We have a team at Johns Hopkins University that will be studying the work that we do and kind of documenting and recording the strategies to test and make sure that they work, see what strategies work, see what strategies don't. So in the end, we can develop a case study and learn from our work this year to double down and continue to accelerate next year. And so we're really excited about that because we want to make sure that we're placing our investments where we know we're making progress for students, where we know we're developing teacher capacity, and we're closing the gap that you saw earlier from the history of the winter and math ELA and math data points. So we're not just going to be throwing spaghetti on the wall to see if it sticks. We're going to actually be implementing specific strategies, measuring the impact of those strategies so that we can make better decisions moving forward. If you can move to the next slide, please. And so what's coming up next are, again, building out and making sure every school has a plan for high dosage tutoring. Again, that's where we identify the students that have performed at a level that need acceleration. That's typically the students that are way below grade level or below grade level, that have a certain threshold of attendance so that we can get consistent tutoring happening to them. We also have tutoring options that are virtual so that we can reach as many students as possible. And we'll have time after school with extended learning to figure out how we can reach students with more time to be able to practice, to be able to study, to be able to engage in recovery work. Again, we'll be visiting schools in the coming months to see how teachers are engaging, to listen around what's working and what's not, so that we can double back and rethink our systemic PDs moving forward, rethink the type of coaching supports we'll provide moving forward, as well as see what instruction looks like when we're implementing the prerequisite skills teaching and we're continuously providing grade level instruction. It sounds easy, but it's very difficult to do. So we want to be able to observe the nuances. We want to listen to teachers around their planning effort, around the support they're currently receiving, so that we can constantly upgrade and adjust to meet teachers where they are so they can deliver quality instruction. And then lastly, as Dr. Steiner mentioned, it's going to be important for us to really step back and think differently about both our curricular assessment, and so that's our Dibbles assessment that measures K2 foundational skills in reading. That's our Eureka module assessment, our Wit and Wisdom module assessment, and our Amplify assessments and our iReady assessments that give us the grade level data in the domains at which students are performing. So we need to be able to step back, see all of that, make sense of it, and then support schools to do the same so that we have very clear delineations of what students should receive based on where they're performing on the data. And that's coming up over the months of October and November. And again, through all of this, we're going to periodically be meeting with Dr. Steiner and his team to share our strategies, to share the data, and to go into the schools and walk so that we can document along the way what's working, what's not, what can we adjust. So ideally, a year from now, we've got a full-fledged model that we know is getting results that we can double down on, invest on, and continue to close the gap for our students. Let me pause here and just check in with my partner, Aquila James. She and I have been locked at the hip in this acceleration work. We've been working very carefully with Dr. Steiner. Aquila, just want to check in with you and see if I've missed anything, or of course, if you want to add anything as well.
Mark, you did an outstanding job as usual. Let's keep it going. Thank you so much.
Okay, just double checking. And so these are the leaders here, of course, our fearless leader, Dr. Dabrowski, creating the conditions and setting the path for us to be able to do this challenging but such meaningful work. And then myself and Aquila are leading the work, and Dr. Stein is behind us, guiding us, pushing us, so that by the end of this year, we have confidence that what we're doing is working, not just because we feel that way, but because we have evidence to back it up. And most importantly, we've won not only the trust, but the confidence of our students, our families, and our teachers that now see that there is hope and potential for our students to get back to grade level and beyond. So I'll pause here and see if we have any questions, thoughts, reactions, or pushback from the audience.
Thank you all. I see some of my colleagues with questions. I'm going to start with them. So Commissioner Reed, I see your hand. Go right ahead.
I guess it's two questions. I guess the first is, what's the cost of the process? How do we pay for it? And is there a timeline in terms of, is it a finite life? Because money's pretty tight right now. And I guess my second question, hypothetically, I'm a ninth grader. I came in September 2021 and 19 as a ninth grader. And I'm taking math courses. So I come in 2019, taking Algebra 1. Then the next year, I guess I'm supposed to take geometry. And then this is a third year where I'm supposed to be taking Algebra 2 and trigonometry. How can I be accelerated in something as complex as jumping from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2 and trig?
So I'll take a stab at the first question first. Most of what we've shared so far, with the exception of tutoring and maybe some of our virtual programming, is already built into what we do on a regular basis. So our curriculum work with Wit and Wisdom and Eureka, that's the curriculum that we already have. The work of supporting teachers directly with our academic planning facilitators, our academic content liaisons, these are all positions that already exist. So the prioritized standards, the prereq skills, and the making sure that we're analyzing our data to do that work is built into our current model, so there really isn't a cost there. We have a tutoring program. I don't have the exact number, but we can easily get that to you, where that's going to be part of the ESSER dollars that are coming. And so that's on a grant. And the extended time, I think, is also part of the ESSER plan that we have. And so that might also be some additional funding, but we've already budgeted for that. So there shouldn't be any unforeseen costs coming around that. The second question, I think, is a national challenge. I don't really have a great answer to your question, Commissioner Reed. I think in general, whether you're a ninth grader that was in Algebra 1 and are looking to accelerate, or whether you're a second grader that wasn't decoding yet and are now in the fourth grade, I think a lot of it is a comprehensive approach and more time on task. I think tutoring is going to be a huge leverage for students. And so if you're a ninth grader in Algebra 1, you're going to have some time for tutoring. You're going to have a dedicated time to isolate for personalized learning. I think that the staff at your school have to be aware of your situation and aware of the goal for you to be able to get back to grade level, and whether it's extended time every day or whether it's some time in the summer to be able to recover some of that credit and be able to get the credit for that course that you might not have had the full time for, could be a strategy that we leverage. But it's going to take a comprehensive approach for not just ninth graders coming in at Algebra 1, but I think a number of students that have lost time. And I think the idea is to really be able to isolate the most important standards, the most important skills, and just be at that all the time with those students, so that they are focused on what matters the most and not on everything. I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker. And then lastly, we have to have family and community support. We have to have all hands on deck to support our students in doing this. And the good news is I think we're off to a great place with that already. The FCE team has really worked in collaboration with us around the student learning plans. I think that is a game changer in terms of bringing more adults just to one student's perspective to understand how to help them. But in essence, it's a very large task that I don't think we're afraid to tackle, but I do think it's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of commitment in ways that we haven't seen before. And I'll hand off to anyone else that want to add in.
Just very quickly, it's a great question. I'm just going to address the second one, of course. We have mapped, along with Joel Rose, who has an organization called New Classrooms, worked in New York City. We've mapped the specific math skills at each grade level linked to the Common Core standards. And it turns out that between a third and a half of those skills are never used again. That is to say that they are not cumulative towards the later grade levels, or particularly algebra. They are not things that are useless. They are there for a reason, but they are, for a student who is behind, The most crucial thing is to think forward. What will that student need for Algebra 1, for example, if they're coming into it? And they do not need the previous 3, 4, 5 years of everything. They need very specific prerequisite skills for very specific parts of starting to learn algebra. And so part of this is using a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer, right? And that's hard work, right? As Mark said, that's where the diagnostic has to be good. It's no use saying again the child has a fever. We need to know exactly what the challenge is. What's the skill that the child is struggling with that we must have competency in for that child to successfully understand, not the whole year's work, not next month's work, but next week's lesson. And I think one of the big challenges here is to say that we have to focus in very precisely. And look, as Mark rightly has said to me and to the team, we are trying to change years of practice, right, that didn't work, that left us with these yawning gaps. We're not going to get everything right this first year. That would be impossible. Baltimore is leading the nation in saying we are committed to acceleration, not just in ELA and math, but in social studies and science. That is, in my view, an amazing commitment and an incredibly important one. We've created a hierarchy of subjects. Don't get me started on that. But I think the crucial point here is skill as necessary for grade level lesson on X next week. Not looking at, if we look at the whole mass of the year, then we say this isn't possible. We have to break this down into the manageable pieces. Thank you.
Commissioner Etienne?
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. Thank you for what you just said, because a part of what has really struck me in all the conversation is the fact that this is almost a dual process. It is very clear what the process means for students, but the other set of students are our teachers.
Yes.
And so that's, I see the same steps in terms of our teachers, because I know we have this high quality curriculum, but we've spent many years, at least my time on the Teaching and Learning Committee, in trying to assure that our teachers are teaching it with fidelity.
Right.
And that, to your point, not going to, finding something to pull off the internet to use, but to use the curriculum that we've taken the time to do. So my hope is, I know we have the funds in terms of the work that we need to do for students, and I know that we have a structure in place to support teachers, but we really need to look at how we're going to expand that particular structure. And I know this is a terrible thing for me to say as a person that really loves teaching and worked with teachers a long time. We really can't afford to maintain folks in the classroom that are not going to be able to move effectively the way we need them to. And so I don't know what that's going to mean in terms of how we support teachers and the whole process of evaluating teachers with this new strategy in place. But those are key. That's a key area for me as we're moving ahead. But kudos, because I think, thank you. It's about time we started getting kids ready to be who they are and what they can be, and not having them stay in the past and just being miserable and not doing well. Thank you.
Chief Dabrowski, did you want to jump in? And then I see you too, Commissioner Griffin.
I just wanted to quickly add to Commissioner Chinia, your piece around the teacher development and the teacher commitment to this work. And I do think another prioritization of funds, back to Commissioner Reed's question, is around what's the professional learning we can offer, not just during the school year when things are really busy for teachers and there's so much on their plates, but what can we do in terms of summer learning institutes that allow that deep level of work as we're going through this first year. And I think Mark has queued this up nicely. honestly. We need to learn from our teachers what their experiences are, where the pain points are, what's hard for them, where they need help, and then using all that we learn to refine and have the time for longer periods of learning together next summer, and being able to have the resources to pay our teachers to join us for summer learning institutes focused on this work. And I think that's the other investment if we're really going to make this pedagogical shift, which is very adaptive in its work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm coming right to you, Commissioner Griffin. I just want to say to Commissioner Chinia, it's really encouraging to hear not only the history you had with bringing our curriculum in, but the kind of insight you have to the need to implement the curriculum with fidelity. I think that's one of those things that's the backbone of our work. And what I will say is, in my experiences over the last 3 years with our curriculum, the vast majority of teachers that I've spoken to and that I've observed are enrolled in the idea of our curricula. They are behind it. They want to implement it. The will is there. The skill is coming. There are very few instances in my previous network or others where we found teachers that were completely trying to not use the curriculum. I think the challenging part is right now teachers are so exhausted. I think that it is hard to be a teacher. It's always hard to be a teacher. Being a teacher is one of the hardest jobs there is. But right now, like, it's harder than ever to be a teacher. And I think that with Chief Dabrowski and Aquella and Dr. Steiner, we're thinking very carefully about the right approach so that teachers can stay in a learning orientation. And so that as we do this work with them, they feel a stronger sense of empowerment and the pressure going down as opposed to the pressure going up. Because we can ill afford to lose any more of our teachers. We're already losing too many as it is. So I'm with you on that they've got to teach it with fidelity. But I think we have to first take that first step of making sure that we're meeting them where we are, to Chief Dabrowski's point, and being of such value add that they want to continue to engage with us and do this work. Commissioner Griffin.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Steiner.
No, very quickly, I couldn't agree more. You know, when teachers are, let's say the curriculum says you're going to teach Baldwin's The Fire next time, right? And you look at your students and you say, they don't have the background, they don't have the vocabulary, therefore, I'm going to meet them where they are and not teach this challenging, important text, right? I'm going to teach them something else. We have to say, look, we are going to work with you so that you can give them a really engaging video clip on 1960s, right, when this book was being written, something on the biography of James Baldwin, right? So, things that help them have access to that grade level story, and never ever say that this child can't do that, right? That they just somehow were born not capable of reading this crucially important, very moving text. And I think the temptation has been to go back, right? And to say, sorry, this is so clearly beyond them. And we know it isn't, right? We know that in really top public schools that won't give up on kids, and we want this to be the norm in Baltimore, right? We are going to get them into a position to read that text, to love that text, and to own that text and be part of the conversation. And that's the work. That is the work.
Sorry, Commissioner Griffin.
Let me just say, all I'm really was stressing was the need for real-time support for teachers, not just that it's going to be in the summer. You know, I'm fine with that, but this just to me is just emphasizing the fact that that particular part of the strategy just needs to be strengthened and to be certain that it's consistent. But thank you.
So my only thing, one, thank you all for the work. I think that what you have presented is pretty comprehensive and it makes absolute sense to me. I definitely understand the plan, the process, the different steps and phases that are necessary to get our students to accelerate. I've always had an issue with remediation, in a sense, you know, being a graduate of city schools and hearing the word remediation when I'm thinking about going to college. And I graduated from Poly, you know, that's like a stab in the heart. It's like, I did all this work. What do you mean I have to take remedial classes? What is that supposed to mean? And so I am glad to see the work that we're doing to further accelerate our students' learning. I'm extremely excited actually about the scalpel approach. And I kind of made a face and Commissioner Cheney laughed. I don't know if she saw my face, but when we were talking about the pieces of certain courses, and I was a math teacher. I'm going to move because I think it's a little loud in here. But I was a math teacher, and, I taught algebra. I taught middle school math, and there are certain pieces of our curriculum. Sometimes it's not necessarily applicable to real world, right? Yeah. And so even as we're taking the scalpel to some of our concepts, and I'm thinking about social studies too, is this something not only our student is going to need in a future course, but when they leave school, whether they're going for college, career, trade, entrepreneurship, business, what have you. Is this applicable in the real world for them to take with them immediately? Is something that I really would love all of us to push to continue to think about. And then also this space of creating independent thinkers, because education in itself, and we can get into a debate around the history of why education was created in the first place, but it wasn't necessarily created to make independent thinkers, right? It was created to have folks fit in specific roles in society. But what we would like to do is have our students be equipped with the ability to critically think and be independent thinkers, innovators, and world changers when they leave city schools. And so when we are taking this scalpel to our curriculum as well and accelerating their learning, how are we also applying that type of lens? And not just for accelerated learning, but for learning as a whole across city schools. So I think this is opening a door for us to really recognize the meat and potatoes or the wheat and the chaff, right? Like what is really the meaty stuff that our kids can latch onto and use immediately and after they graduate versus some of the filler pieces that we know may be required by the state, but we can teach them and we can push our students and accelerate our students' learning to be independent thinkers and have real world application immediately. So that was just the two pieces I wanted to add.
Folks, I appreciate the robust dialogue and conversation that we've had today as it relates to where we know our students can be and grow. Commissioner Griffin, I appreciate your contribution because certainly we want our students to be independent thinkers, and we also want them to be competitive, right, at the same time. And so it's all of those things that are important. And certainly after a year, y'all know I'm dealing with it every day with thinking about how do we use our time wisely, because it's not like we have a lot of time with our young people. How are we using our time wisely and most efficiently to make sure, Dr. Steiner, that we are accelerating, their learning, right? That we are making sure that we're developing, Commissioner Griffin, that independence. And you're right, we can talk about this for a while, right? Because when I think about independence, right, that opens up a myriad of different curricular and academic, discussions. So I just appreciate the work that the team is doing. And I appreciate Chief Dabrowski, how we've partnered to ensure that this is what we talk about for this particular year in this committee, and how hopefully we'll continue to talk about it next year as well. I think this focuses the work and it aligns everything that we do, certainly as we're thinking about strategic priorities and making sure that everyone is on the same page. It's really important that we focus on the needs of every one of our students. So I just appreciate the discussion. Looking forward to how we continue the discussions in months to come. I appreciate all the leadership, the work that folks have done. And to the team, I appreciate you bringing Dr. Steiner into the discussion because we need those partners. We need our partners to continue and those research-driven brains to help us move forward for the sake of our students. And Dr. Steiner, I appreciate how you acknowledged you know, the inequities that exist within our system, but how Baltimore is also on the forefront of trying to dismantle them. And that's not something that we often hear. So I think it was important in this space to name that, but we also have to make sure we're perpetuating that discussion, that language in communities and in all of our circles, so that we lift up the folks that are holding this work as we continue to encourage and provide hope to our young people. So thank you to all of the team. Any of my colleagues, anything else before we move into procurement?
Thank you so much, commissioners. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your support. Thank you to the team at BCPS. It's a privilege to work with you. And if there are ever questions that emerge, please do let me know if I can help answer them. It has really been a great honor to work with all of you. And there's no more important place, right? If we can make this work in Baltimore, it will send not only a powerful, uplifting message to this community, but to the nation. And it's our responsibility at Johns Hopkins to make sure that happens. That messaging you just spoke of, right, has to be made in this community and beyond. We have to stop pushing students backwards. And creating, dead ends. This has got to stop now. And
well, we know that we have kings, queens, and brilliant minds in Baltimore City, right? And we've got to make sure that we're teaching to them and not the students that we're assuming that they are, right? So I completely get you. And Dr. Steiner, I also just want to, just publicly acknowledge the work that and the advocacy that you did on Baltimore's behalf as far as the Kirwan Commission was concerned. And so I know that you're still in all of that. Yes, but certainly, from the board's point of view, I just want to make sure that we, publicly thank you for that advocacy and that work, because it's really important, especially as we move into the next several years here in Maryland.
Thank you for saying that. And again, as we work with the new state commissioner, it will be really important that Baltimore stays front and center. So thank you all. Have a really good evening and see you soon.
Thank you, folks. We're ready for procurement. We have 4 items on the procurement agenda for our review, not necessarily for our voting consideration, but for our review. And commissioners, if we have any questions, we'll take them one by one. And I think I see Courtenay. Good afternoon. Evening.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So our new director of procurement doesn't start until next week, so I'm going to be filling in, so bear with me. We have 4 procurement items, 3 for the Chief Academic Officer, the Maryland School for the Blind, Wisconsin Center for Education Products and Services, Curriculum Associates, and 1 for Human Capital Officer, BKL and Associates. We have staff from those offices, so if there are any questions from the board, we can take those.
I'm going to defer. I don't have any questions per se about at least the first 3. Any commissioners with the first 3, any questions about any of those? Okay. Commissioner Reed, I saw your hand.
Question related to number 4, which is BKL.
Yep.
And I guess my question is, BKL looks to be like $200,000 per year investment, and we're talking 10 principals, unless I'm getting my numbers wrong. I mean, it seems like a pretty heavy cost to pay $20,000 per person for training. I know it's an umbrella training process, but it's expensive. Thank you.
So is there someone from, it looks like Chief Grant Skinner is the author of this letter. Do we have someone from Human Capital who can?
Hi, this is Ashley Stewart, the Executive Director of Talent and Organizational Development. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Great. Is there a question?
Commissioner Reed just mentioned how $200,000 is a lot for 10 principals. Is there any clarity that you all would like to provide to Commissioner Reed on that?
There's something I can speak to on that if it's helpful, but I want to make sure that I nailed the question for him. Commissioner Reed, are you feeling like this is too much money for the?
Well, I guess yes. I guess in a short answer, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, $20,000 per training program per person for 1 year seems pretty expensive. I mean, I know these important people, important roles, but money's, I worry about the money. Thank you.
Yes, I understand. So in the contract for BKL and Associates, there are a number of bodies or portfolios of work. One of them includes the coaching and the onboarding of new principals, which at minimum is about 10 principals each year. Any given year, we can have anywhere from 10 up to 20 new principals starting in our system. That includes principals who were PEP'd or who started their positions in the beginning of a school year, so July 1, or who were PEP'd in June, or those new principals who will replace existing principals this year. Say if a principal leaves, they will need access to onboarding, et cetera. So the cohorts end up being more than 10 principals at a time. That's one sort of body of work that this covers. Another piece that this contract covers is the direct coaching and development of my staff on talent and organizational development. There's a team called the EPI unit, which is the Educational Pipelines and Induction team, which is brand new principals and teachers who coach principals and who are running the induction and professional development services for principals in their first, second, and third year. Because BKL and Associates has run our induction programming for many, many years, we have had a initial set of conversations about bringing all of that learning and bringing all of their development methodology internal to the organization. And so this contract also procures time with this company to train our people internally so that over the next 2 years, we will be able to run this program on our own, having staffed up. So that's the second body or second portfolio of work that this contract covers. In addition, when there are coaching concerns with principals from any of the principals that BKL has ever worked with in the past almost 7 years or so that they work with the district, BKL will take on those principals as part of the contract. So for instance, if I have a principal who's in their third or fourth or fifth year, which is outside of the purview or scope of our team and talent and organizational development, but they've worked with BKL before, which has happened, I think, twice last year in the pandemic, BKL will take on those principals as coaching clients. They will work with them. They will make sure they have either the technical information that they need or the adaptive information that they might need or might be helpful for their ongoing development, which is not something that we're actually staffed to be able to do and provide. So BKL and Associates provides an amazing set of services and coaching and development, not just for the 10 principals at minimum, but also for the 5 people on this team, as well as other principals who they continue to hold relationship with throughout their tenure with the organization. What you see before you is a 2-year contract that gives the district the flexibility of having been in contract with this organization this year and next year, with a very specific eye on building our internal capacity to ensure that in 2 years' time, we will have the knowledge, the skills, and the methodology that BKL and Associates uses, and we can use that in-house to run our own programming. How does that land, Commissioner?
Okay, I think he just left. Commissioner Reed texted me and said he had to leave for an emergency, so that's why he's not here. I wasn't sure if he was still on or not.
Thank you. Other questions?
To align to what Commissioner Reed was going at, my concern is strategy, and this isn't Mr. Stewart, the first time that I've seen BKL and Associates come before the board. I'm not sure if we've seen a multi-year contract with them before, but this also is not the first time that I've heard that a part of us having them partner with us is to support internal strengthening, build the internal capacity so that we don't have to continue to contract out in this way. I'm concerned that we're now seeing this again, and I hear what you just said. I'm concerned that we're seeing it again, and it is a multi-year contract. Is this, to Commissioner Reed's point, the best use of our resources at this particular time? Do we actually need a 2-year contract with this particular vendor? Could it be a 1-year contract? Is there a better use of our resources to perhaps use folks that we have in an innovative and creative way already in city schools to support first year, second year, third year principals? For me, it's more of a strategy concern than it is just it being expensive. Because $400,000 over 2 years, could we be investing that money in folks that already are in our system in a different way? Because this isn't the first time that we've heard that we're using this particular vendor to do just that.
Well, I really appreciate that question because it allows me to be even more clear about the real efficacy of this particular procurement item. I can't really speak to what has happened sort of 3 or 4 years ago before my tenure here with BKL and Associates, or sort of what was pitched to the board before then. I will say that, as someone who is charged with leading talent and development function for the organization, I really wish that I could hire my way to greatness. I really wish that every hire we made for any district office or school position was filled with folks who knew exactly what to do and how to do it and how to maneuver the systems. But that's just not the case. Me being a hire 3.5 years ago as well, everyone has a tremendous learning curve. And when we are charged with supporting principals who are, as you know, the very backbone of our educational system, we have to make sure that we are providing the right sized resources and supports, which include people. So there's fortification of ILEDs, and there's also work with the EPI team that can ensure that new principals are off to an amazing start. We have had the fortunate sort of luck, if you will, to have brought in 2 very well prized, well-known principals into this team, Nakia Carter and Zahara Valentine, who are amazing principals. And at best, except, Nakia Carter, who has run 2 schools, none of them have run more than 2 schools at a time, and nor have they run schools at scale, at a different scale other than 1. And so their ability to coach and to mentor and to lead professional development that redounds to the benefit of brand new principals is paramount for how we can support new principals. Another part of this calculus is when ILEDs and the school's office and human capital come together to make decisions or make recommendations to the CEO about principal appointment, what this team has to do is to look at all of those candidates, assess where they are developmentally, assess their strengths, and then look at the school environments in which they are working and build bespoke, that is tailored professional development to meet that individual principal where they are. Because for the past 3 years I've been in this role, we have not been able to do that. BKL and Associates gives us the extra person power, if you will, also the bandwidth and the expertise to be able to do that. And so, as you know, the team, Educator Pipelines Introduction, is a new team. We have 3 new people on this team, including the 2 I mentioned, and Tracy Frazier, who is also a principal coach on the pipeline side of the work. And she is new to the system. The 3 of them bring amazing skills to this work. They do not bring the longevity or the history of how to work at a systems level like BKL and Associates does in the bench that they bring with their coaches. And so that is why I think this is a worthy investment, especially for right now. When we were in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, my office was slammed with requests from principals on coaching and development, and we were unable to help them in ways that I think we would have liked to. One, because we didn't have the staffing, and two, because we were already at capacity trying to keep the other pieces of the work afloat. This contract gives us much more leeway, and it gives us the expertise we need. What's written in this contract is an exacting set of activities that BKL and Associates will do with our internal team that transfers knowledge, that works alongside the 4 people that I mentioned to transfer not only the methodology, but certainly coach our staff in a particular way. I wish I could do that myself, but I run a staff of more than 20 people, plus resident principals, and don't have the capacity to do that. So they are an added bandwidth and they're added capacity. And not to mention, they are a trusted advisor who has results in terms of the number and types of principals they've worked with and their track records. So I think this is a most worthy investment, especially because of right now. And also, the last thing I'll say to this is BKL and Associates, I said earlier, provide more coaching to our principals who are not in their first and second years, but because they've had a relationship with them years previous. That was a tremendous save for us as a district. We didn't tout it, we didn't talk about it publicly, but when the going got tough, principals called BKL for support and mentoring and resources. We want to be that mentoring and that resource support for our principals moving forward. We just have to learn how to do that well and smartly. And what I have learned about this work in city schools is in order to go fast, I have to go slow. So in my thinking, the next 2 years with a solid team in place, we will be more than ready to move this contract off of our general operating funds or our title funds in this way, and we'll have our capacity built. Again, if I could find all the wonderful people in the world who will come do this work for us, who had all the right skills and the right knowledge and the right grounding because they've worked at a system scale in a particular way, I would make that hire in a heartbeat. It also brings me pleasure to invest in the principals and educators who've served in our system and to actually build their capacity to do this work for the long haul.
I appreciate that. And I wish some of what you're saying was listed in the evidence of effectiveness in the actual board letter, just a little bit more substantive. I mean, you gave a nice explanation, but to the full board, it would be helpful to see some more of that listed in the evidence of effectiveness area. This also still, for me, is not the first year that we've seen BKL and Associates come up. I don't know how comfortable I am yet, me personally, with the 2-year contract at this time, but I'll take some more time to think. Maybe we'll get a few more things in from staff that can help with that. But that's just where I am. Commissioners, are there any additional questions or thoughts?
Commissioners, while others start to click in or not, I will say this, that we can certainly get you more information in the data of the evidence section for that. And I will say that what this contract allows us to do is to not have to come to the board again in the middle of principal season or the middle of the end of the fiscal year with another renewal contract. We always reserve the right to renew or not renew a contract. This just gives us the flexibility of not holding up the work when we find ourselves crunched at the end of the year like we did last school year. And so the idea was for us to create a 2-year contract because we knew that we would need a longer runway. The level to which we end up funding that is a total negotiation that we will make. But it is really sort of the ease of having to do business administratively. But I take your point and I thank you for your question.
Commissioner Chenya?
I would only suggest, as you have stated earlier, Commissioner McFadden, that perhaps we add some of the narrative that we just had, Mr. Stewart, into the letter. I personally don't have a problem with this procurement. I'm just a reminder that this is one of the key areas that the board has really been focusing on in terms of growing our own bandwidth in terms of principalship. So I do think this is an important piece, but perhaps you could, as was requested, just add more in terms of the evidence in the letter to go to the full board.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to do that. Happy to do that.
I appreciate that. For me, it really just is like, I want us to get to the place where, to your point, Mr. Stewart, we just have a strong internal, we're strong internally, right? Where we can develop our own. We have the ability to do that. There are a lot of bright people that work in city schools. It would be great to see more of our ILE. I'm glad that the commissioners, we've adopted, CLNs and networks this year. But when I think about coaching, it makes me think about how ILEDs are involved in that work as well. Excuse me. So hopefully this can support with that. I don't have any more questions. I know that we're about 15 minutes over our time this evening, and I want to be respectful of that. Commissioner Reed, did you have anything else? Commissioner Griffin, Commissioner Chenia, anything else?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners. I really appreciate it. And I want to also draw your attention to the district's award of the Wallace grant around the Equity Center principal pipeline work, which I think really will help to accelerate our work around coaching and development of principals in a major way over the next 5 years. And we are working very swiftly to braid together pieces like BKL and Associates work, new leaders work, our partnerships with Towson University and Morgan State Universities, as well as with MSDE. So this is part of a much larger strategy to really bring not just sort of talent in-house, but to create the apparatus that we need to support our people in ways that we know is appropriate and ways that we know we actually just need to do a better job at. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. The next meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee of the Board of School Commissioners will be on November 2nd, 2021 at 3:30 p.m. And those agenda items, of course, are going to include an R3 update. However, this time the focus will be around wholeness. So it will be great to it's going to be great to hear, some updates about that. In addition to our grading policy, updates to our grading policy, which is also important as we're focusing on acceleration and moving forward. I do not believe that there is anyone signed up for public comment this afternoon. Mr. Gant, are we okay to adjourn?
Yes.
Great. Everyone have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay dry. It looks like it's about to rain. But folks, be safe. I appreciate all of the work of everyone who has presented and just working in general for the sake of our children and for the sake of our community. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
during the pandemic, we kept getting questions from, I forgot to stop freaking recording. He said during the pandemic, we kept getting all these questions